How are you doing, green industry business leaders? This is episode number 29 of the Green Industry Profits Podcast, where we talk about how green industry companies can grow in a profitable way. In today's episode, we had a conversation with Mark McGuire of Open Space Gardens. We dive into his journey from the software industry to leading Open Space Gardens, detailing the acquisition process and management aspects. He highlighted the importance of integrity and transparency in business, discuss growth plans, reflected on the benefits and challenges of entrepreneurship through acquisition, and much more. And before we dive into this episode, just a quick note that this podcast is brought to you by Cycle CPA, a remote accounting firm that works specifically with green industry companies. For more information, go to cyclecpa.com. And without further ado, let's get into today's episode. All right, everybody, super excited for this episode. Um, Going to be talking about a topic here that we haven't really touched on much. Very, very interesting background and guest here. But thanks for joining us here, Mark.
Great to be here, Joe. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Very cool. And so Mark, he runs Sacred Space Gardens out of Minnesota, and um, has a little bit of a different background than I think most people in the green industry. But Mark, if you don't mind, maybe expanding on that and how you got into the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the outset, I will say this is my second season with the company after acquiring it last year, and one of the things that we're changing this year is the name of the company. So we'll be rolling out that change next week. So we're changing from Sacred Space to Open Space Gardens, which I'm excited about. The goal there was to evolve the brand a little bit, but not have it be a crazy, jarring transition for the customers that use us. We have a name in our market. So I tried to strike a balance between evolving the brand, but also not having it be a huge disruption. I'd be happy to talk a little bit about that at some point too during this interview. But a little background on myself. As you said, I'm probably a little atypical of coming into the green industry. I spent the bulk of my career in venture-backed software startups. I went to law school, got a law degree here in Minnesota. Never practiced law. Actually went right from that into kind of the first dot-com boom, which will sort of date me as to how old I am. But with a good friend of mine, went on to co-found and start five different venture-backed software startups, and everything from helping large law firms and big brands police the internet, to doing comparison shopping for U.S. Consumers, and a little bit of in between there. It was a fantastic kind of initial part of my career. There were parts of those startups that I absolutely loved. I think it was Reid Hoffman who said starting a company from scratch like that is kind of like jumping off a cliff with a group of people and trying to assemble an airplane on the way down. And it definitely feels like that. In my career, I've had a couple of those where we were able to put the airplane together and really take it off and grow it, and have a couple of great exits for both myself, our team, and the venture capital that invested in us. And then I had a few that never really made it off the runway, which also are, but you learn a lot in both of those experiences. But really enjoyed that, and really enjoyed the challenge of like taking an idea in your head and trying to recruit a team and build out a product and raise money and kind of balance all of that to try to get it to actually something that was repeatable and scalable and sustainable growth, which was really fun. I got to a point in my career a few years ago where I just didn't want to sign up to do that again after my last startup shut down. And I kind of evaluated a bunch of different things, up to and including maybe retiring. But I'm still fairly young, and I really started to get bored. I missed working on something. I missed working shoulder to shoulder with a team, growing something. And I just really feel like if you're not growing, you kind of feel like you're dying in life. And I just wanted to get back to running a company and, working with a team. But I also just didn't have it in me to start something from scratch for a sixth time. And I had sort of stumbled upon a different path to entrepreneurship, this concept of buying an existing small business or medium-sized business, which, as you know, we've talked a little bit about, Joe, is really an emerging space. A lot of people refer to it as ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition. And I stumbled upon that just with some podcasts and books, and it really started to look like a very attractive path for me where I could essentially step into something that was way more de-risked than a 0 to 1 type of startup. That had employees, that had systems, that had profitable revenue and growth, and all of the brain damage and gargantuan effort to kind of push that boulder up over the hill to get to that point was already done. And you could step into someone's leadership role and hopefully take that baton and move it forward. So long story short, a lot of people in the ETA space spend months and sometimes years searching for the right company to acquire. I think just through absolute dumb luck, literally the first company that I looked at was the one that I bought. So
Wow.
um and it turned out to be Sacred Space. And it aligned for me in a bunch of different ways. One, I'd always been sort of interested, even though I have like no plant knowledge, no gardening knowledge, no landscaping knowledge. I was always intrigued. I've always been very environmentally conscious, and I've always been intrigued with like how we use the land around us, and ways that we can transform sort of a monoculture like turf grass that we spend a lot of time putting fertilizer on and chemicals, and really doesn't provide a lot of ecosystem benefits for for us or for the creatures around us. And look at planting native gardens, or doing landscaping in a more sustainable way. It was a an area that I was really interested in. And so the mission aspect of Sacred Space Gardens really aligned with that. They're the founder of the company really started on this idea of, let's transform more turf grass into gardens and use native plants where we're creating habitat for bees and other pollinators and insects and birds, and all the things that kind of rely in that web of life. And then we do a bunch of other things to try to have a sustainability mission of, we don't use a lot of we really rarely, if ever, use any chemical, like insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, those kinds of things we stay away from. We do a lot of things manually, a lot of manual weeding, manual tools. We use electric power when we can. So there was a lot of that really resonated with me from a like aligned with my values. And the other piece that was cool about that was, everything that I've done in software has been so virtual, and it didn't have a lot of tangible evidence of it around me. And it's been so rewarding to be able to work on something where, I can drive around town and go, oh, we did that job, or we're working here, or that. So the aspect of, seeing the work and believing in the mission of the company was really important to me. So I checked the box there. A couple other things that any of your viewers that are thinking about acquiring a company, or maybe they're in the business and want to acquire a new one. The other things that were really important to me were, I wanted to work with a high integrity seller, and the founder of this company, a woman named Maddie Poling, really is high integrity. I developed a good rapport with her very early. There was a trust factor there, and I just because no matter, you're never going to have perfect information about the company you're acquiring, and so there's certainly a leap of faith that goes along with that. And she made it very easy for me to make that leap of faith because she was high integrity. She backed up what she said. I trusted her from almost from day one, so that made the process super easy. And the other big component for me was, she had a core team of project managers that really had been with the company for a few years. And thankfully, and this isn't always true in an acquisition, but she gave me access to them pre-offer. So I got to meet that team. And, especially for somebody like me who has zero domain expertise in gardening and landscaping, I really knew I was going to have to rely on and lean on that team for the day-to-day operations. And I didn't want to get over my skis and get into something where, everybody left and I was, left scrambling to try to figure out how to deliver the services to the customers that we had. So, immediately really, bonded with that team. I could tell they were high quality, they were motivated, they seemed like good people to work with. And so, with those kind of initial data points, I really made the decision to go full speed ahead. And acquisition came together fairly quickly. It was about 6 weeks from initial contact to start, and it's been just over a year, almost a year since the anniversary date of the acquisition.
Wow. That and thanks, Mark, for giving us that overview. But there's a lot to unpack there. So
Yeah.
um, I guess um, starting when it came to looking to buy a company, when it came to searching for a company, how do you recommend, or I guess what are the best ways people can search? Is it online means or a broker? I guess what would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you what I did, and then probably if I go through and do that again at some point in my career, how I would do it a little differently. I went to Google and just searched, businesses for sale, and listed a couple of towns here. And Sacred Space was one of the first companies that popped up. Maddie had hired a broker, and they were promoting the sale of the company. So that's the way I found what's now Open Space Gardens. Um, I think if you look at kind of best practices, there's kind of two different avenues of search. There's a self-funded search and then a search fund. Search funds have been around for a long time, and that's really been reserved for, someone who's got some pretty strong credentials. Maybe they've got an MBA from a top school, they've gotten a lot of business experience, and they have enough credentials that they're able to go out and actually get investors to put a pot of money together to pay their living and search expenses for a period of time, with the opportunity then, when that entrepreneur does find the right company, those outside investors that have funded that search get to invest in them and the company. So that's kind of one path. If you're credentialed enough to do that, I think it's a fantastic way to go. And you have to sort out how much equity, how much ownership in the company you want to give to someone else. One of the things I love about this new path, in my previous startups, I've owned a decent chunk of all of them, but there's also been co-founders and other people on the team. There's been outside investors that owned a large chunk. So it wasn't just mine. And it's been wonderful to be involved in a company where it's just my family's asset. And I have the ability and the flexibility to move any direction I want whenever I want to, which has been refreshing and fun. And I think one of the cool things about the ETA path. So if you go the traditional search fund, clearly you're giving up some equity in that case, but you're also de-risking it even more, in that your living expenses and all the costs of that search are funded by outside parties. If you don't have those credentials or don't want to go that path, a self-funded for search is the other kind of way they phrase it. And that's where kind of what I did. You're just out on your own looking for companies. And there's several ways to do that. And there's lots of content online if you do a little bit of searching, for anybody that wants to see it. But there are some of these big listing sites, like Biz Buy Sell is probably the largest repository of existing small businesses for sale. There are business brokers. One of the biggest ones in our community here is Sunbelt, and I think they're across the country. But there are some brokerages that you can connect with. One word of advice I would give is, you're going to need to sell yourself as an entrepreneur and someone who's got enough capital and wherewithal to make an acquisition in order to attract a decent business brokerage or a business broker like Sunbelt, because they get a lot of deal flow and they get a lot of people, and they're able to be kind of choosy about who they work with. So, if you can attract a high level business broker, I think that's a fantastic way to go. And there are a lot of people that just brute force it. They're sending out bulk emails. They're looking around their community and just doing cold outreach to any small business that they may have an interest in. And there are lots of ways that you can generate deal flow and source companies that are potentially for sale that way as well. So those are some of the things I think I would do if I did a search again, is kind of cast a broader net, and most likely try to get a quality business broker working with me to find the right company.
Yeah. No, and I think that's phenomenal that it was literally the first company that you looked at, because
I know.
I think a lot of people, they have that analysis paralysis where they just keep on
Yes.
looking and looking and looking and don't take action. So that's awesome there. And when it also came to the integrity of the seller, so that was something you had mentioned. And I thought that was a great point, Mark, because at the end of the day, you can have the most elaborate contract with someone or another vendor or another entity, but I think a lot of it does come down to, are they a good person? Are they, of high integrity? Are they going to do the right thing at the end of the day? Because there's probably ways around a lot of different agreements and contracts anyway. So it's you know
Yes.
good not to have those surprises. But I
Yeah.
so and Mark, now with the integrity piece, how, like what were some examples of things that made you comfortable with with the seller in regard to that piece?
I think probably the biggest initial one was, I've been in business a long time, and I think one of the things, and I've done one of the main things I've done for all the companies I've worked with is business development and sales. And I think you get pretty good with, a lot of repetition in that, of being able to read people and, get a good feeling fairly early for the type of person you're dealing with. So, my skill set is, I think, gotten refined over the years in that, and that I have a good kind of BS meter, if you will, when you're talking to
Yeah,
someone. So that checked out right away. And then, the big initial step was Maddie being willing to kind of share her access both to all the data she had. She was very much an open book with everything, even with things that weren't great for her, that weren't a sales point. So being transparent both with the good and the bad earned a lot of credibility initially, and then also giving me access to her team, I thought was fantastic. And, getting a good feel for them and having them vouch also for, her leadership, her integrity, those kinds of things. All of those things initially really helped kind of get me over that hump. And,
yeah,
I will say, um, if I can't imagine working with a low integrity seller or someone that you couldn't trust, or that, sort of disappeared on you, because
yeah,
like you said, you might have a legal claim against someone, but to enforce that costs a ton of money. It's a ton of distraction.
yeah.
And meanwhile, you've got this new company, squarely in your lap that you're also trying to juggle without any support or help. And, I think back on all of the work in transferring over that asset of, I needed every password from LinkedIn to Google to, Meta to, everything in between. Just transferring over those accounts was such a huge amount of busy work and coordination and organization. Bringing over all the financial information, having a good handoff with existing clients, just all of that at the same time that, I did an asset sale. So, I created a new entity, and that new entity essentially bought the assets out of the old entity. So I had to create a new LLC. I had to get a DBA. We had to register a new trademark. We had to, there are all of these like state and municipal kinds of, hurdles you have to go through or steps you have to take at the same time. So there's just lots of moving parts while you're also trying to step into, operating and executing on the business at the same time. So, those things were really critical to have a seller that was supporting in that effort. And it's also, the one other thing I'll say that was such a distinction between starting something from scratch versus stepping into someone's company is stepping into the company. There are a lot of cool parts to it, like for the first time in my career, I actually was cash flow positive day one. I didn't have to worry about how I was going to meet payroll or rent or, some of these other things. I didn't have to worry about acquiring my first customer that, was making this leap of using something that they'd never heard of before. In a lot of ways, I kind of approached that first season of, I just need to not screw anything up. And I already have a company that the revenue was growing, it's profitable, we have good customers, we have good employees. So, stepping into that was so de-risked. But at the same time, you're almost like stepping into, a fairly large ship that was captained by someone else, and all of a sudden you're behind the wheel. And you're trying to figure out why you do the things the way you do, what you might break and mess up versus what you might be refining and making better. So there's some
Yeah,
really challenging parts in that, definitely.
yeah, and that's a great metaphor, and it brings me back to the days I used to work on ships because the same thing would happen, Mark, where different captain would come on board, and there were those slight changes, right? But it's kind of
Right.
like being able to, make improvements or just kind of see, okay, where can we kind of pick up from where we left off? But no, that's awesome stuff. That's some great insight as well. Now, were there any surprises, once you did step in as that new captain?
Yes, great question. Honestly, I would say I was lucky enough to not have any like major gotchas or huge
Yeah,
surprises. Um, a couple of the biggest, I guess, concerns I had going in were, one, how profitable was the company and how much was it growing? Because, um, I'm super impressed with the seller. She did an amazing job growing this company from scratch while also being a full-time mom of twins. Um,
wow,
but one area where the company, wasn't like super robust was in the financial side. So I had very limited financial information going through this acquisition. And the first season I really did a lot of management by bank account balance.
yeah,
Is the cash balance going up or is it going down? So I was
yeah,
flying blind a little bit that way. So there were certainly unknowns there of, like, will the company continue to grow and how truly profitable is this revenue that's coming in? That really checked out. We did have a great first season, and sort of hit the goals that we wanted to hit. And I think we're really poised now to continue to scale up and grow. One of the things I did was start to work with you this season, which I think is going to help us get our financial game, stepped up quite a bit, and we'll be able
sure,
to, make some more informed decisions about, how we're delivering services, how we're pricing, benchmarking against the industry, those types of things that I think are important points. But that was one of the big worries I had going into year one. And then the other one was, will this team check out? And was my initial reaction that this is a great team and that I would enjoy working with them check out. I've never worked with um, in the industry, and I've never worked with a seasonal team that you're hiring year over year. I've always, worked with someone where it was more like, they were in a career, they were advancing in the career, they were salaried. It was a different type of kind of employee base. So I was concerned about that going in, and one of the kind of beliefs I had, and both in meeting some of the leadership team, and also because we're so mission based and we have this kind of native plant emphasis and sustainability at the core of the company, my thesis going in was that we would be able to attract a motivated employee that sort of aligned with that mission. And sure, they needed a seasonal job and they liked working outside, and they loved that type of work, but they also had that added motivation of sort of believing in what we were doing as a company, that I was hopeful would really attract a high level of employee and someone that was motivated and hardworking and that I could potentially retain. Um, that was a big risk going in that I wasn't sure of, and I'm really happy to say that absolutely checked out the first year. We had a phenomenal year. The management team, was fantastic to work with. They've all come back this season. And a lot of our gardening and lead staff in the field also is coming back this season. And it really is, partially because we had a great culture, and I can't really take credit for that. That was the seller that had really developed that culture. I've tried to,
Yeah.
carry that on, but it's also because they just love the work that we do. And that's been a really a pleasant, not surprise, but just validation of what I was hoping going into this.
Yeah.
I will say also one of the things that struck me that's so difficult in this industry, um, is in my previous life working in software, we had fixed costs, but then our marginal costs when we grow are virtually nothing. And it's very easy to go, you could 10x your growth in 3 months, and really all you'd have to do is plug in more, web servers and cloud capacity and bandwidth, and you can hockey stick your growth. And in an industry like I'm in now, in the green industry, where you're relying on a seasonal staff and a staff of folks to deliver the service. It's almost like the three bears kind of growth. Like, you need it to be just right. It can't be too hot where you get ahead of yourself and you don't have enough quality people in the field to deliver and have good customer reviews and reputation. But you don't want to go too slow where they're not getting enough hours and people are kind of stagnating. It's got to be in that kind of just right range, which is it didn't strike me before I bought the company, but it dawned on me pretty quickly as we
Yeah.
started to grow last year of like, oh man, I really have to keep a close eye on how much we grow, how fast we grow, and make sure that I'm bringing along those employee resources at an equal rate.
Yeah. No, no, absolutely, Mark. And what is your goal with the company? Are you looking to continue to grow it, or just maybe optimize profits where you're at?
No, I'm definitely in growth mode with the company right now. Um, we again, I love the mission, and I one of the things that I'm really striving to do with this company is right now everyone on our team is seasonal. We kind of go into hibernation. We do, if you look at our business lines, we do garden, both installations, design. So we design, native plant and other garden installations for homes and businesses. We do maintenance of lawns and gardens, and then we do seasonal planters. And that kind of blends into some winter decorations as well. We're not doing full scale like holiday lighting, but the season kind of wraps up with those holiday planters. And then we've really traditionally hibernated until right about now, about mid-March, when, the weather starts getting nice here and we start to ramp back up. And, one of my goals with this company, and one of the things that has just been such a rewarding part of working in small businesses, is creating growth and creating career opportunities and resume builders and experiences for the team, that you're working with. So, I'm really in growth mode for a couple of reasons. One, it's fun and it's infectious and it makes the culture, even easier to, be positive.
Yeah.
Two, I love the mission of the company, and I love thinking about creating more habitat, and, you see all this depressing things about bird populations in our country, and, monarch butterflies are dying, and the rusty patch bumblebee here locally is about extinct. And so you can feel helpless when you read a lot of that stuff, but it's neat to be able to be counteracting that in the work that you do. So, I'd love to continue to make that positive impact across our community to create more habitat. Um, and then lastly, with that growth, I really want to try to bring our staff into more full time and have this be more of a career and less of a kind of initial stop on, their development of a career, if you will.
Yeah. No, that's phenomenal, Mark. And a lot of the very successful companies that we work with, and just throughout the industry, I think, have a similar mindset in regard to maybe not looking to grow for the sake of growing, but as you get some great team members and the opportunities are there, it's just kind of things happen organically a lot too. So um, that's that's awesome. And you had also touched on your domain expertise within this field. Um, if so, I guess how has that evolved? I guess as you've stepped into the company, I guess did that end up being like more of a challenge than you had envisioned, or less of a challenge, or I guess how is that part of it then? For
Knock on wood, so far that has not been an issue. Really because of that core team that is really executing the operations of the business on a day-to-day basis. So, this last year, I was really able to focus almost exclusively working like on the business instead of in the business in the day-to-day. I was involved in the day-to-day, but it was more in empowering and managing the people that were actually driving the bus day to day. So the way the company's organized, we have an office manager who is really the implementer across the organization. I have three project managers that are really, very they have great backgrounds and experience with the type of work we're doing, and they really are the primary kind of customer outreach. So, they take the leads that come in, estimate the work, and really make sure that that client gets taken care of throughout the whole process of our relationship with them. And so, that core team really helped me to be able to say, okay, they've got this. What can I do to empower them and to, optimize and to make their work as efficient and as powerful as possible? So I've always, it's so easy to get overwhelmed when you're, driving the bus, if you will, and working in a company where you're wearing many different hats and you don't have a lot of resources around you. And one of the things that I've always tried to do in this type of environment is to simplify things and to boil it down to, the few things that I need to focus on and make sure I get right. And then delegate or forget about all the other things. And so, last year talking about working on the business, I really focused on two main things. It was, are we bringing in enough new leads and retaining the customers that we have? Number one, and am I recruiting and retaining the most high level quality people that I can? And those were the two things that I really focused on. And I tried to just delegate everything else. So, I really experimented with a lot of customer acquisition things. I worked on our funnel and trying to develop and optimize more, like how many leads do we have coming in, and how quickly do those translate into estimates, and how many of those are converting to actual customers, and how many of those customers are happy, and are we retaining them? So that was a big part of what I spent time on. And then how are those leads coming into the funnel? So we did a lot of Google AdWords last year. We experimented with, like door stuffers and flyers. We did a lot of social media experiments, and I'm really excited to continue to experiment across, seven or eight different kinds of customer acquisition tactics this year, and then really try to double down on the things that are working well. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I think that's great insight there, Mark. Because when it comes to trying to find the best customers possible and also the best team members, I think a lot of things kind of boil down to that, especially as the leader of a company. So, um, I think that's fantastic piece of advice for people because I think sometimes it's easy to get caught up in some of the other ancillary things that are going on. But at the end of the day, especially with the seasonality aspect, like you had mentioned, you have some of these challenges in regard to staffing, stuff like that. So, but any other pieces of advice, Mark, or anything else here before we wrap up?
Yeah. Let me see. I mean, I guess for anyone that, was listening to this that's thinking about buying a company, as a path to entrepreneurship, or maybe even scaling their existing business through acquisition, you know, I could say, I mean, it's not for everyone, but I think if you go about it thoughtfully and you find, the right situation, it can be a phenomenal way to either step into entrepreneurship or grow. And I would highly recommend it. Um, I think personally, if I was talking to a young person who wanted to be an entrepreneur, I would steer them the ETA path versus the 0 to 1 path, just because I feel like in my career, I was lucky enough to grow and sell a couple of companies, um, and did quite well in that. But in many cases, I feel like I just got lucky.
Yeah.
I won the lottery in a way that is not possible, and wasn't really reflective of me being a superstar. I was just with the right team in the right market at the right time, and a lot of those things you can't control when you're starting something from scratch, and you're really starting something that's completely unproven. So the risk profile in that is incredible. And when it works, it's some of the best experiences of my life, but it oftentimes doesn't work. So, to send someone down that path, I would be just really hesitant, or want to make sure it was, they knew what they were getting into, versus ETA, which I feel like, is such a less risky proposition. And there's still the opportunity to become, a very successful entrepreneur and business owner moving through the ETA path versus, starting something the way I'd done previously. So, that's something I would recommend. There's tons of resources out there. It's getting to be a well-developed kind of path that, 10 years ago was, you had Stanford grads on their MBA program that were doing traditional search funds, but there weren't a lot of people like me buying existing small businesses. And now there's a very robust ecosystem, a set of service providers, podcasts, information, books. If you have an interest in it, you can learn it and get it and step into that very quickly. So, that's one thing I would say. I guess other than that, I'm just very happy to be back involved in working with the company again. And it's fun to be at a stage in your career where you sort of know what you're good at, know what you enjoy, know what you're bad at. And I've been lucky enough to be able to craft out a situation where I like what I'm doing. The stuff I'm doing, I feel like I'm decent at. And I'm able to work with quality people that complement me and do those other things really well too. So, I would just encourage everybody to, in their career, work to find that recipe. And it takes a lot of, experimentation and stops and starts, and there'll be failure along the way. But, when you do get to this stage, it's just really fun to be excited about getting up to go to work every day and grow something meaningful.
No, that's phenomenal stuff, and it's going to be what from what sounds like a very exciting year for you here, and um, you know, how have you liked being in the green industry?
I've loved it so far. Yeah, it's been really enjoyable. The seasonality part of it was kind of strange when we
Yeah,
shut down, and
yeah,
around the holidas. But frankly, I kind of liked it. It was a
yeah,
neat time where, like, it was quiet and I had the space to, like, we switched our CRM over the winter. We've rebranded to Open Space Gardens. We've changed some of the way we're actually getting to job sites, where we're carpooling in company vehicles now versus having employees meet. So I've spent a lot of time looking at, our different revenue lines and what's profitable and what's not. So to have the luxury and the space to kind of regroup every season, I think is really a cool part of
yeah.
this job, which I really enjoy. And then the other
Very
piece
good.
of it, like I mentioned before, is it's so damn tangible. Like I actually can see, in the real world stuff that we're doing, which I've never been able to do before, which has been quite fun as well.
That's awesome, Mark. And what's the best way people can reach out to you if they want to connect?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. My email is just my first name, Mark, Mark, at openspace.gardens.com. One of the reasons I was excited to do this podcast is, one of my goals for this year is to connect with more green industry folks like me across the country. It's kind of cool that we're all in our own little geographies, and you can really talk collaboratively with people that aren't really competitors, but really are sharing a lot of the same challenges and opportunities that you have. So I'm hopeful I get some people that reach out from this, and would certainly welcome. Happy to be a resource for people, ask any questions that they have if they're going down similar paths that I've gone down before as well. But I'd welcome any of that outreach.
That's awesome, Mark. Well, listen, thanks again for joining me here, and have a nice day, all right?
Absolutely. Looking forward to working with you this year in your firm too, Joe. Appreciate it.
Same here, Mark. Bye.
Take care.